Welcome back to Close. We're still live at the Real Deal Forum. I think we've had a few moments where we've had to question our existence.
It's been a blur.
It's
We're
been a
on
little bit of a
hour
blur.
5.
Yeah, and I just found out that the coffee table has shut down next to us, so after this I'll be going out into the streets to find some. But
this is the podcast, by the way. It's just the two of us talking
just
about...
us telling dumb jokes.
Yeah.
Now,
There's not much else that happens.
I'm very excited actually for this one. We're joined today by YuhTyng Patka. She's a partner at Adler Stachenfeld. She's one of the leading legal experts in New York City, maybe New York State, on real estate tax policy.
Maybe the country.
I mean, New York State kind of outstrips the country in all these issues, especially real estate, so we can give her that too. Top tax attorney in the country, particularly on incentive programs, climate compliance law. Tyng actually chairs Adler and Stachenfeld's New York City real estate tax and zoning incentives practice, its Climate Mobilization Act task force, and its PACE financing practice. And I'm proud of myself for pronouncing all those things without messing them up. She's been quoted in the Commercial Observer, The Real Deal, BizNow, and the New York Times, and actually was recently named to Crain's 2026 Notable Women in Law. Tyng, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk today, obviously, about New York City's property tax system, and it's probably the most important topic that we're talking about today, because I think a lot of people feel that it's a system. Obviously, everybody has to work through this system, but a lot of people feel like it's broken right now. So you're someone who works within the property tax system, especially in New York City, every day. Why don't we start with just, for the unindoctrinated, when we talk about certiorari proceedings, what are we actually talking about? Just like basic 101.
So what I do is called tax certiorari, right? Certiorari is a Latin word for review. We call it tax cert for short. And what it is, it's the review of property taxes. So what I do is I represent New York City owners and developers on various property tax issues. Tax cert is the review or challenge of property taxes. And then alongside tax cert, I also represent developers on tax incentives. But my tax cert experience and expertise and understanding how the city values properties helps to support also my expertise in advising my developer clients on the tax incentives. So tax cert is it's a fairly simplistic process. You file a form with the city, but the forms are deceptively easy looking, right. You know, so you need an expert like me to understand why the city is asking for your income, and it's why they're asking for your expenses and stuff
right.
like that.
Yeah, this is the part, you know, everybody I think kind of focuses on what's the cap rate, what did you buy it for, but really in the background, what the tax structure looks like, what you're actually paying in taxes, can you reduce that, and for new construction, you know, what kind of incentives do you have? That can make or break the budget or the deal. So it's like this critically important foundational piece that I think a lot of times is like below the surface because it just doesn't sound as sexy as the,
Right, property taxes are single-handedly one of the largest, if not the largest, operating expense item.
Right.
For an existing building, and then for a new construction project, it makes or breaks the deal.
Yeah. So let's get into the fun stuff now. Why is it broken? Maybe that's too broad a question. Let's talk about some of the ways that it is broken and why it's been so hard to fix for probably our entire lifetime, like last 40 plus years.
I don't know if the system is really broken. I think that's the very broad brush.
It's kind of a headline grabber too. I
Yeah,
guess.
exactly. You know, I think the system, it's very complex because it's trying to cater to a lot of different interests. Because it's complex because you have different tax classes, meaning you have different types of buildings that get put into a certain bucket, and then depending on which bucket you're in, there's a different way of valuing that bucket. And then even within that same bucket, some properties are valued differently. So no one is going to be happy. You can't make everybody happy, and you can't make everybody equal. And I think that's what people mean when they're calling the property tax system broken, that For example, a common headline is that condo unit owners are not paying their fair share of taxes in comparison to single-family homeowners in the outer boroughs. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to label that broken, but it's really because of the complexity of how the property tax law and valuation methods have been implemented.
Right. It also has a lot to do with, I guess, who has the biggest loudspeaker and most lobbyists. Landlords that have rental buildings.
Right.
Obviously, to them, it's unfair that condos and co-ops may not be taxed as much.
Right. It makes for sexy headlines. Right. And then condos and co-ops. That means there's a lot more voters in one building than there are in a single-family home in the outer boroughs.
Right.
Very cynically, that's how I think.
Yeah.
Because
we like cynical.
Right. when you read all these headlines, it's it's really usually there's an agenda behind those headlines.
No, definitely.
Mike touched on incentive structures, and I think without incentive structures, new development in the rental market is essentially unworkable, right? So, do you view kind of continuing to iterate on incentive structures as like a durable long-term solution, or is it a band-aid to kind of temporarily permit new rentals to go up while we try to figure out a more durable solution?
I don't view it as a band-aid. I view it as an essential tool, because tax incentives have been around for literally decades.
Yeah.
Right? 45X is the new program that replaced 421A. 421A had been around since, I think, the 70s. And in addition to 421A, there's a bunch of other tax incentives. There's ICAP, there's pilots. And this is not unique to New York City. There's tax incentives all over New York State, all over the country. So I don't think it's a Band-Aid. Like I said, it's a tool, so I think there is longevity behind it, because these tax incentives, when thought of correctly and implemented in a thoughtful way, they do what they're designed to do, which is to incentivize certain types of projects to be built. For example, the 467M tax incentive, which is commonly referred to as the office to resi conversion incentive, but it's not just office conversions. Any commercial building that's converted to resi is eligible. The 467M incentive, which is pretty new. It came out in 2024 with 45X. 467M has been wildly popular and successful. It has done exactly what it was designed to do, which was to incentivize conversions quickly. There is a ton of activity going on in the 467M space right now, particularly in downtown Manhattan, but also in other parts of Manhattan. I'm also even seeing it in the outer boroughs. So, as I said before, if an incentive is designed thoughtfully, it will be a success. So I don't view these incentives as band-aids. I view them as essential.
So they're part of the longer term solution, it sounds like.
And they evolve with time, right?
Like right,
said,
exactly.
So 421A, was around for a good 40, 50 years, and now one of the things, because we follow each other on social media. You have a lot of thoughtful posts on LinkedIn, and I think this is where I saw this. You pointed out pretty early that the 485X incentive has this threshold at 99 units or 100 units. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because for the unindoctrinated, again, they may be wondering why all of these new buildings are capped at 99 units, and then there's one that I was reading about that I think has like a second-story pedestrian walkway so that it's connected to a building behind it, but technically that one is also 99 behind it. Jump into that a little bit. What happens beyond this magical threshold?
That's why I love doing
99 units, but not one more.
It's why I love doing what I do.
Terrible.
Because developers are some of the most creative people that I've ever met. And so 45X is a property tax incentive designed to spur the development of new construction multifamily. And the 45X replaced 421A, which was also a similar incentive. And so 45X, why people are why there's a lot of headlines and publicity right now around 99 unit buildings in particular is because the program as written requires projects of 100 units or more when they're built that the developer has to pay a minimum wage to construction workers. And that minimum wage floor mirrors very close to union wages. And that's exactly what the program is trying to do as designed. It's trying to incentivize owners to use unions. Unions were a very powerful lobbying force behind the 45X, and they were the reason why 45X was voted into law. The 421A, which expired in 22, there was no program for 2 years because the unions and the lawmakers could not come to an agreement. So what I've been told by my developers is that for certain projects, for a lot of projects of a certain size and certain locations, paying union wages, like when coupled with all the other expenses that a developer faces, like insurance, acquisition costs, like everything else, that it just does, the project doesn't pencil out. They cannot make a project economically feasible if they have to pay essentially union wages. So therefore, as I said, the threshold is if you're 100 units or more. So inevitably, that's why we now see a ton of 99 unit buildings, because the law says if you're 100 or more. So therefore, if you're less than 100, you don't have to pay construction minimum wages. And so what we're starting to see is the proliferation of some creative strategery around this requirement. So for example, if I could originally build a 300 unit building on a site, now I will chop that up into 3 adjacent 99 unit buildings.
Yep. This is why it's so hard to legislate good things into laws, right? Nobody wants construction workers that are skilled to be underpaid, obviously, and legislators want to protect that. How do you do it? You have to have some kind of threshold. Well, in practice, once one developer exploits the loophole, every other developer, these guys have to raise money. A lot of these developers, they're really salespeople more than anything. They have to raise money. They have to get people to buy into their vision, and if they're not following the leader, why would anybody lend to them or invest with them if they're not doing it the smartest, best way? So it's just this is why it's just an ever evolving circle. This is why lawyers will always be in business, right? So because it's just going to be a cat and mouse game, over and over again. There'll be something to replace that, and so on and so forth. We're keeping this very cynical but fun. It's a great combination for a lawyer podcast.
I'm not cynical at all about.
It's true.
Tyng is making me very bullish on the realities of the property tax system in New York. Who's not bullish? The mayor. Recently called the tax system fundamentally broken, deeply inequitable. We're not going to make this a political podcast. We've had developers on the podcast who are upset about the current administration, others who are kind of like it doesn't matter. But how do you view that statement? Do you think it's purposeful? Is he trying to position certain legislation, or does it reflect the reality of where he's sitting, that he believes is a broken tax system?
I don't think we have encountered a mayoral administration that has not called the property tax system broken.
We just forget, right?
De Blasio even commissioned a property tax reform commission that issued a report that went nowhere, right? Like Adams also tried, and I think there's a lot of political realities. Number one, right? Like mayors have a limited time in office, minimum 4 years, maybe 8 years. I think they're term limited to 12 years. Even though that sounds like a long time, when it comes to
it felt
legal
like Bloomberg
reform,
was in office for 48 years.
Well, he pushed it to 12, I think. but still, even with 12 years, what happened right after him? We have de Blasio, and we have like the repeat of the circle.
Right, exactly. Legal reform takes a long time, and the property tax system is ruled by statute, not only city statute, but also state statute, right? The mayor can control, to an extent, the city's laws, with their influence over local lawmakers, but the city is at the mercy also of state lawmakers. And so that's a very heavy political lift. So that contributes to the complexity and the challenges of the property tax system. Just that there's so many pieces that need to be moved and so many different constituencies. That's why administration after administration has, in good faith, I believe, wanted to institute changes, but then they're met with the political realities of their limitations.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, let's shift out of politics. Let's talk about something that could be practical for whether you're an owner or maybe you're even a lawyer that's listening to this podcast. I think it's fair to say we have a lot of lawyers, and you have no idea what you're doing in the real property tax space, but you have clients that you maybe want to get the right advice. This, I think, to me is the type of thing where if more people focused on it, they would all be ringing someone like you up for advice. You've won some significant tax refunds for building owners whose properties, they were just placed in the wrong tax classification entirely. I mean, how does something like that even happen? And then what should somebody do to verify or to check that they're being taxed properly? Because if you get a tax invoice from the city, it's not so easy to read. It's like a phone bill from Verizon. You have no idea what's internet. What should they be looking for? And maybe give us some examples. It might be easier for people to wrap their head around how something like that can happen.
So this is going to sound self-serving, but my advice is don't try this at home.
Yeah.
You should speak to an expert like myself, someone who understands front and back how the property tax system works, because you can get yourselves in trouble very easily. It's a very time-sensitive process. It's a very intricate, detail-oriented process. Like, for example, you wouldn't go to your eye doctor for open heart surgery.
Yep.
That's like the example that I give. The significant property tax refunds you're referring to, the misclassifications, that was just that was me discovering that the city was interpreting the law incorrectly.
Imagine that.
What?
I said, imagine that.
Yeah, I know. Shocking. And then it was also the fact that some of my peers who had been around longer than I have been were therefore kind of brainwashed into adopting the city's wrong interpretation, because my peers had been around forever. They're like, this is how the city has always done it. This is how it is. And then, like a young whippersnapper like me comes along, takes another look at it, and realizes, no, this isn't right. This is, so then I brought a couple challenges to the city and was successful, and kind of became like sand in the city's eyes, like in pointing out to them, hey, you've been doing this wrong.
Yeah.
So that's. Again, that's, because like I'm trained in this, I'm an expert in this, and I know what to look for. So anyone who has any questions, I highly suggest that they speak to an expert.
Yes, I would second that. We try not to dabble, we try not to go too far outside of our field of expertise, but tax, like we don't even make an attempt to answer a tax question.
I won't even say the word.
We don't even say the word. We abbreviate it. And they don't know what we mean anyway, and we just hang up the phone. What else we got? Let me talk a little bit.
Yeah, I'll ask one more question on your own personal experience or the advice you give clients. On the developer side, if there's kind of one thing a developer should be thinking about when they're thinking about first structuring their deal, and they come to you and they're thinking about, what should I know about from a tax perspective before I decide, other than keeping it under 100 units, if I want certain tax incentives, what should a developer be thinking about in terms of structuring the deal from a project size perspective, a location perspective? What are the one or two factors that you think are most important?
So that's an interesting question, because I kind of view it as like chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
Meaning, does the developer already have a project in mind, and then they come to me, and then I start thinking, okay, you're planning on this kind of project, then you may be eligible for X, Y, and Z kinds of tax incentives, right? And that's like the chicken, or the egg could be, hey developer, here's a whole menu of tax incentives. Why don't you build your project around the incentive requirements?
Are developers more likely to I would imagine they're more likely to come to you with the former than the latter, right? Is that
right? Yes, yeah, because they're juggling a lot of balls in the air at once as well. Because not only are they trying to figure out underwriting, and property taxes are a part of the financial model of whether or not they can make money off of their project, but they also need to consider what zoning and land use does this particular site legally permit? What can I actually build here? Can I build office? Can I build a supermarket? Can I build a store? Can I build apartments? Can I build all of the above? Can I build mixed use? And then after they figure out what they can build, they also need to figure out how big they can build, because the city's zoning and land use laws also constrain the amount of floor area that a certain site can provide. So like I said, there's a lot of different balls in the air. The 99 unit thing, what I'm hearing from my clients is that they are leaving floor area on the floor, meaning the site that they have can, for example, this is a real life example, they could build up to 125 units. But if they did, they would have to pay construction minimum wage. But 125 units is not large enough to support the construction minimum wage. If they were building 300 units, that's a different story. They could. But 125 is not that large of a building. So therefore, they chopped their project. I've heard two different ways. Either they still size their project to the 125 unit building envelope and chop it into 99 larger units instead, or they just cut their building down to size. And which then perplexes some people looking at it with like, why didn't you build to the maximum envelope? And they're like, well, because otherwise I'd have to pay construction minimum wage.
Yep.
It feels like there's a legislation gap that needs right there, where okay, you have these incentives that are based on once you exceed this certain threshold, there shouldn't be a disincentive for people to build. I feel like that's a legislative gap.
Yeah, like what's wrong with 45X, the way that it is structured right now? Like you said, it's a disincentive.
Right.
Nobody wins here. Everybody loses. The city is in my example, the city just lost 26 units of housing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? A portion of that which was going to be permanently affordable.
At least we don't need more housing in the city, so that's fine.
Yeah. Like the developer just lost 26 units off their rent roll.
Yep.
The tenants, there's 26 less options for them to choose from.
Right.
So
I know. This is like when you walk by a row of 5-story buildings, you go, why do they all stop at 5? And they didn't want to have to put the elevator in. But it's one of these things where you can look at it, maybe in 20 years people will look and go, why did they build it this way? This is crazy. But at the time, it's
or they'll listen to this podcast.
Or maybe they'll go to the archives of closed and we'll be retired and hopefully not famous, but definitely wealthy enough to be retired. That's my wish for all of us here. But all right, well, we appreciate your time. How can people find you if they're looking for great tax advice?
They can come to my firm's website, www.adstack, that's ADSTACH.com, or they can Google me, Tyng Patka, Tyng Patka.
Good stuff. And I highly recommend following Tyng on LinkedIn because she posts a lot of good stuff on there. I think I've said that twice actually, but worth repeating. Good stuff, Tyng. Always good to see you.
Thank you,
Tyng. And thanks very much.
Great chatting.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's great.
That was good.
All right.